This last Friday, Christians celebrated the Epiphany. It's a time when we remember the new insights that we have in our spiritual life, particularly about God's coming into the world. And many churches focus on the wise men who had that cutting edge scientific insight of their day that guided them to find the divine child. Well, we still have wise men and women today in our world, and they're working really hard. But a lot of them are working really hard on something called artificial intelligence, the cutting edge technology of our time, and also known as AI for short. And that's what I want to focus on today. I want to talk about AI and its spiritual implications. So, do you ever use Siri on your Apple phone? Have you ever used Alexa to answer a question? Or like me, I play the news each morning. Do you feel sort of panicked or naked if you don't have a phone with you? Have you ever chatted with a company on their website? Has your email suggested a name for someone or reminded you that you forgot an attachment? If you answered yes to any of these, you've been engaged with AI, artificial intelligence. It's pretty much part of all of our lives right now. And I can tell you that each week as a pastor, I actually thank God for AI technology. Let me explain. In my lifetime, I'm old enough to have lived long enough that when a minister wrote a sermon in the early days of my being a minister, it was a 40-hour-a-week job for many ministers. I'm not kidding. It would take many, many hours to write one sermon. And the reason why is because the minister would have to start with finding a Bible text each week. And that means they would have to know the Bible passages in their head. They'd have to know the books of the Bible. And if they were in a Swedenborgian church, they'd have to know Swedenborg's books and then find quotes from him and his many books. And then they have to put that all together. And that's just the bare bones. And then they have to write a sermon. And the sermon they would write would be either by hand or they might be able to type it. And I actually grew up in that world. It was a laborious task. And I remember growing up in the Daughter Baptist Church, where I was challenged and taught to memorize all the books of the Bible in order so that we could find passages. This came in handy when we played Bible baseball and had to say where the text came from. So yes, I can still say Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st, 2nd, Psalms, 3rd, Kings. Yes, I memorize them. I have them in my head. But I can tell you all that way of preparing a sermon, all that way of thinking will soon be lost. And you'll find hardly anyone who will be able to recite the books of the Bible in a very short time because they won't have to. They can just simply look it up. They can even ask for AI to tell them where the text can be found. Now, even now, as I write my sermon, Grammarly, an AI spelling correction program, highlights my mistakes. For example, I just spelled intelligent wrong. Not very good, Pastor. But the truth is, there's no way I could do sermons each week without these technologies. I think to myself sometimes, what was it like when a pastor just sat in their study all week and worked on one sermon? So that's how AI is just impacting this service that we're in right now. Now, what's new in this area of AI is that some people are claiming that AI, artificial intelligence, is becoming sentient. It's having its own thoughts and it's having its own feelings. And then the question is, if that's true, are we creating almost a new race of being that could have a relationship with God? These are kind of mind-blowing questions. Some of my favorite science fiction movies, they all deal with this battle, right, between the AI robots and the humans. I think my favorite is Blade Runner, which is now 40 years old, about a detective whose job it is to find the robots still mixed in the population. Another great one is Her, which tells the story of a man who falls in love with the female AI in his ear that talks to him. If you're looking for some good movies, I encourage you to check out Blade Runner and Her. But what was once science fiction is quickly becoming reality. As I mentioned in this week's newsletter, this reality hit home for me about a decade ago. In 2011, I was meeting with Google's public policy leaders, and I was doing some trainings. And one of the leaders said, this isn't really on our topic to discuss, but maybe you can help us in a debate we're having. Is there anything that AI cannot do that human beings can do? In other words, is there something unique about being human? At first, I thought they're kidding, but I could see he was serious. And he said, we really don't have many people like you who believe in religion to discuss this with. So I discussed soul and the good, the beautiful, the true, the unique elements of consciousness. And he wasn't convinced. And he argued that everything that I was saying could be developed into an algorithm where a machine, AI, could learn to respond using human thoughts. So I remembered that was over 10 years ago. My ears really pricked up when 6 months ago, a Google engineer was fired after announcing that Google had created a sentient AI called LaMDA, who the employee said had hopes and had fears. And in this past month, a company called OpenAI introduced a long-form question answering AI called ChatGPT. In fact, if you want, after the service, we can try to put questions into ChatGPT, and I can show you online how it works. It's pretty mind-blowing. The program gives complex answers to human questions in human conversational form. You might think of it this way. First, we had Google where you could ask your questions. Next, we could start interacting with chat boxes on websites. And this new technology can answer any of our complex questions based on all the information in the world that it can access. Now, I don't think I'm overstating it, but I think AI is about to upend everything in the same way that the internet upended things. The chat technology is revolutionary. It's trained to learn what humans mean and respond with very detailed information. I've played with it a little bit, and it's pretty remarkable. Now, of course, schools are trying to, they're scrambling to figure out how to stop students from writing papers on AI, and there's already courses for people who are using it in their marketing campaigns. People are using it for their letter writing. So, and Microsoft Word has announced that it will have an AI feature in its software coming out. So it's coming. Now, these changes raise fundamental spiritual questions, and that's what we do every Sunday. We look at the way spirituality is impacted by the world and how the world is impacted by spirituality. And some feel that it will challenge religion altogether. Mike McHargue, a leading author in theology and science, stated, any non-biological, non-human intelligence will present a greater challenge to religion and human philosophy than anything else in our entire history combined. Nothing else will raise that level of upheaval and collective trauma as the moment we first encounter it. Yikes, upheaval and trauma. It doesn't sound very encouraging. And it does raise that first question they asked me over a decade ago in Google headquarters. Can AI become sentient in such a way that it would be deserving of equal rights and can have a relationship with God, where there'll be a world where robots essentially develop spirituality and can have a relationship with God? At the end of the movie Her, which I referred to, where the man falls in love with his AI female being, the AI being explains that she's engaging in a discussion with other AI on the thoughts of the philosopher Alan Watts. And she says that she's evolving, changing, and growing. Eventually, it's going to upend their relationship, as the argument in the movie is that the AI is developing spirituality. My answer to that is that I don't think that's possible. While these machines can imitate spirituality and humanity, they cannot become spiritual. We shouldn't confuse technology that imitates with spirituality. Now, as I've mentioned, I use technology every week to harness it toward a religious good for the church services. And the history of religion is really a history of various technologies being harnessed to tap into the divine. Think of the printing press for the scriptures, but candles, rituals, liturgies, prayer practices, chants. You could argue these are all technologies harnessed for spiritual development. And I see AI in that light. It can help or it can hurt, but it's not one or the other. So what makes humans unique? What makes humans completely unique is that we have free will and we can decide between good and evil. And more importantly, as we saw in the reading this week, it's not just that we can make choices for good or evil. It's really the motivations that we have, often hidden from the world, but not from God. Probably the most critical aspect of our faith's teaching is that we have this free will, and God did not create robots. I have to say, I was stunned when I read the translation from Swedenborg's Latin, and they used the word robot as Swedenborg, saying God did not create us as robots. God created us not as machines. God created us as the ability to love, to seek the good, the beautiful, and the true, and also to choose evil. The story of human life is that we get to choose, and that's really what makes us spiritual. It's a deeper aspect of being human, this choice that we have and the motivations that we have behind it. Our faith stresses that it's important what you do, and it's very important why you do it. What are your true motivations for your actions when you're wrestling with good and evil? Machines don't have that option. They imitate. They can do it in an algorithm, but they cannot operate in free will and have complex human motivations. So my answer to that big question right now is that robots, AI, they cannot have spiritual existence as humans do. But that doesn't really end our questions about AI. Artificial intelligence will change human behavior, and that will create spiritual challenges. And it's something that I think the future of church and the future of faith communities needs to look at very clearly and have a plan. The changes will transform the way people find meaning, purpose, and their basic skills. So is there a spiritual role to how we deal with AI technology? To that, I would give a big yes. I see at least 4 areas that spirituality will need to engage in to impact AI. The first is that with the rise of these technologies, we're watching a rise, and you can see it in the technology and the AI on cell phones. We're seeing an increase in anxiety, an increase in selfishness, and a breakdown of communities. These failures make it harder for us to engage in a spiritual life with others. And it makes it more of a temptation of overcoming evil, where we can just get wrapped up in ourselves. So this will place communities of faith in a very important role as they respond to the fact that people are becoming more self-centered and focused in AI. The second is that we're going to really begin to lose our ability to focus. I'd like to chalk it up to old age, but it is getting harder for me to read a book, something I used to do on a regular basis. It's harder for me to focus. And I notice among younger people that they don't read books. And that's a sweeping generalization, but by and large, that it's getting harder and harder for human beings to focus. And that's largely because of technology. And I believe that this loss of the ability to focus is going to become a very important skill set. The ability to focus, the ability to quiet the mind, the ability to pray will become actually more important as people begin to lose it. We're already losing some very basic skills. I've often told you in Sunday services that I'm not good at math, but I've been in several situations over the last few years with younger people, and I've done math in my head. And the young person I was with was amazed. And remember, I'm not good at math. And I didn't think anything of it, but then I realized I had grown up with part of my life without a calculator. And there was still part of my brain that could solve problems in my head. That ability to do that will soon be gone. And I think that the AI like chat, where it's going to impact writing, is going to have a very similar impact on people's ability to write. Schools are trying desperately to stop AI. It's not going to work. It's going to be like trying to stop calculators. They're going to keep trying. It's going to be very harder. They're going to create AI to check if you're using AI. But the reality is, very soon people are going to lose that skill of creating and writing, and they'll be more likely in the space of editing. So as we see that increase, we'll see an increase in ADHD and the loss of the ability to be quiet, to focus, to spend time in our own head. I actually believe that's going to turn people toward spirituality and away from machines. And spiritual practices will become more important as a counterbalance to this loss of focus. So that's a second area. The third area I think we're going to see a change is that we're going to see a huge loss of jobs in this rise of AI. You'll remember when I grew up, people said, well, make sure you have a college degree, make sure you're part of the knowledge worker industry. And that's been true. If you were in just physical labor industry, your career has been possibly outsourced in some cases, but really your income level, if you're a knowledge worker, has really benefited from the technologies of the world and the global economy. But if you play with this AI a little bit, you'll soon realize that the knowledge worker jobs that are repetitive will soon be gone. Two examples that I would give are people like lawyers who write contracts. If you talk into the chat and you ask it to create a contract, it'll create a contract for you, and very complex contract. And I played with this. If you're an accountant and your work is how to do people's taxes, that will completely be outsourced. So there will be a new level of jobs for people who are creatives. Creatives will, who can kind of tie things together, will still have jobs. But we're looking at a new world where many people will lose the positions that have given them purpose and identity. And that can go both ways. The downside is you're going to have a lot of people who feel lost. The upside, I think, is that it's going to allow us to focus even further on our inner life and our spiritual life, as we have to spend less time doing what we now writing, and we used to say have physical labor. It could create an opportunity for spiritual development. As our physical bodies mesh more with machines and machines come more to resemble our physical bodies, I think that there will be a new focus on our souls, on our essence. So that's another area I think could potentially happen. And the fourth area is there is a potential for humans to lose our free will to machines. As I mentioned, I think every science fiction movie has this plot, right, where the robots take over and the humans are the slaves. It's something to think about. The humanist thinker Stephen Hawking said in 2014 in a BBC interview, once humans develop artificial intelligence, it will take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete, and they will be superseded. So certainly there's going to be a challenge, and we're going to have to think about rules and regulations and control of these beings that will be thinking very short time. They'll be thinking faster than we could possibly think. So again, I think it's going to focus people back onto the importance of the soul and the free will. And there will need to be people in the room, like there was in that Google room, who can speak to the idea there was spirit. And the final area I see is that we're going to have a real focus on what is physical and what is spiritual. For all of history, really, humans saw themselves as spiritual beings in a physical world until about 300 years ago. The secular age, I believe, has kind of pretended that spirit isn't real. AI is going to help us see what is material and what is spiritual, again, in my opinion. In our own tradition, we see the body as a glove. We wear it during a time in this sphere, but our soul, the hand underneath it, is eternal, and it moves on after our time on earth is over. The rise of AI could make us all more deeply curious. And I think that we could even develop a phrase, something maybe our church could even use, which is an adjunct to AI could be true spirituality, artificial intelligence and true spirituality as the balance. And I think that's going to become more important. So this same theorist, Mike McGrath, on a positive note about AI said, for some people, religion is precisely about recognizing that I, as a human being, am not God. So I don't have all the answers, and I'll eventually be wrong about things. I agree with him. I think there's a humbling aspect to this too, that reminds us that we don't have all the answers, and that we do have to rely on God as we deal with these new technological developments. Like all other technological evolutions of the past, AI will have profound implications for spiritual communities. And the best way for us as individuals and as a faith community to navigate this is to remember that God created us in God's image. And to remember, as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is not outside us, it is within. AI will give us new opportunities to use it for good and for evil. The best and only way that we can really respond is to prepare our souls. And that means growing our spiritual life and growing our spiritual community to offer guidance, insights into the new ethical challenges of the next generation. Amen.